Good morning, all. As we enter into this service, please note that those of you who are participating via Zoom have been muted by our host, and we ask that in-house participants please remain masked while in the sanctuary. Also, please be advised that this service is being recorded and, with the exception of joys and concerns, will be published online. Finally, if you wish, please take a moment to arrange your own chalice at home. The decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a woman's life, to her well-being and dignity. When the government controls that decision for her, she is being treated as less than a full adult human responsible for her own choices. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, AKA the notorious RBG. Janet will light the chalice in the sanctuary. I invite you to light your own chalice and place it where it can be seen by all of us. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope as a sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Thank you, Janet. Before we sing the first hymn, let me remind the remote participants to leave yourselves muted and our in-house participants to remain masked. However, we want you and whoever's with you to sing as big and loud as you like. Make it a joyous experience. Please stand if you are able and sing the opening hymn with heart and mind, number 300. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist community of Cambria. We are glad you have joined us today. Our UUCC sanctuary sits on land that the Salinan and Chumash indigenous peoples historically inhabited. We honor their contribution to this region and give thanks for the opportunity to gather as a faith community on their unceded ancestral lands. As a Unitarian Universalist community, we celebrate religious diversity and welcome all who journey in search of faith and spirituality. The UUCC is a lay-led congregation run by the democratic process. We invite speakers from different religious traditions and spiritual or scientific backgrounds to speak at our pulpit. We encourage presentations covering a variety of topics and areas of interest to our community that connect with the UU 7 principles. Today's service centers around the first principle. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Reverence and respect for human nature is at the core of Unitarian Universalist faith. We believe that all dimensions of our being carry the potential to do good. We celebrate the gifts of being human, our intelligence and capacity for observation and reason, our senses and ability to appreciate beauty, our creativity, our feelings and emotions. We cherish our bodies as well as our souls. We can use our gifts to offer love, to work for justice, to heal injury, to create pleasure for ourselves and others. My name is Nancy Tolan, and I am your worship associate this morning.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi. If you are not on the mailing list, and I would like to extend a special welcome to today's guests and visitors. We're glad you joined us this morning. If you are not on the mailing list, please visit the UUCC website at www.uuccambria.org so that we can keep you informed about all of our activities. Please check out What's Happening, a weekly e-blast sent to all members and friends. This is a great way to keep up with the latest news in the community. And as a reminder, if you wish to see this or any past Zoom service, recording of these services can be found on the UUCC website and Facebook as well. The membership committee invites non-members to join our community. Please contact Diane DeMarco or a person on the board if you're interested. Thank you. So again, good morning and welcome to everyone. The affirmation is both a recognition of the nature of this community as well as a promise we make and aspire to. Let us now recite the UUCC affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. We set aside this time for any short announcements that would be of interest to our UU community members and friends. Please keep your items short and to the point. For any items that need more explanation, please call or email the person after the service to be respectful of everyone's time. If you have an announcement, please raise your hand. When Diane or I call your name, please stand or unmute yourself, then speak. Does anyone in the sanctuary have an announcement? Okay, Diane, how about anybody in Zoom land?
Yes, we do. Robert, would you please unmute yourself and tell us your announcement?
Good morning, everybody. Tomorrow, Monday, August the 1st at 10 a.m., there will be a men's group meeting. The meeting will be on Zoom, and Andy Fagan will circulate an email with the link. If you happen not to be on that email, feel free to contact Andy or me. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Don, would you please unmute yourself and tell us your announcement?
Thank you. I just wanted to let people know that two things. One is that I will not be running for re-election in November for the CCSD board. But I want to let everybody know that August 12th is the deadline for filing if an incumbent decides to run. If no incumbent decides to run, the deadline is extended to August 17th. And I just bring this to your attention because this is an opportunity for us as Unitarians to practice the principles of democratic governance in our little small pool here, which is where, of course, all politics begins. So I invite anyone who has questions and are contemplating the idea that they might wish to do it, or have any questions about it, or what the job takes in terms of your own brain space, please feel free to contact me. I think my email is available in the church bulletin, but you can always reach me through the district website. So I do invite participation here. It was a life-changing experience for me, and even at the advanced age that I am now, I don't regret for a minute doing it. So, and again, it is a really great opportunity to practice some of the principles that we hold dear. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I have an announcement. First of all, I just wanted to say the women's group would be meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock on Zoom. And we have a very provocative and interesting topic. So if you'd like to join us, please contact me at ddspirit55@gmail.com. And let's see, there was another announcement that I had. Yes, we have a meditation on Thursdays. Just wanted to remind you, it's at 10 o'clock at the sanctuary. And if you think you are having some memory issues, meditation is really good for it. Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Nancy.
Thank you, Diane. Next week, we begin our Summer Sermons by Other People series. Bryn Albanese will kick off the series in her inaugural appearance, delivering Waiting in the Garden by Scott Alexander. Treva?
So good morning, all. Just a quick couple of announcements. The board did have an opportunity to meet virtually, and we are planning on meeting in the sanctuary this month, third Monday at, what time was it?
Friday.
Friday?
Friday at
No, wait.
6.
I'll get back to you on that. But it is actually we are planning on having it in the sanctuary. We've said this many times before, but we're actually going to do it this time. And just very quickly, some of what we spoke to, our treasurer was not there, but we'll be looking at that this month. Their secretary gave his report, and the minutes were approved and passed. And then some of the discussions we had, really all of the discussions we had were around the sanctuary and what happens in here. So there was some discussion around potentially bumping up what we're paying for our speakers, because we have some really high quality speakers, amazing speakers. And so looking to compensate them a little bit more for the time that they so graciously give us. We discussed our COVID guidelines in terms of what we're wanting in the sanctuary, because ultimately we really want you back. We want you back in the sanctuary. And I know there was talk at one point of asking to look at vaccine cards. No, we're not doing that. But we are going to ask people that come into the sanctuary to continue to remain masked, just to help everyone feel a little bit more comfortable. We're also looking at ways to make the sanctuary a little bit more welcoming, like it used to be. It's a little bit dark, but putting some of the chairs together, you don't have to sit 6 feet away from your best buddies anymore. Just ways to encourage you to come back in. And I know at some point, personally, I would like to find another way to end our services, because part of what made our services so special was getting into that circle at the end and holding each other's hands and looking in each other's eyes and knowing that, this is your community, this is what you're a part of. And we're missing that. So these are all topics that came up. Be looking for some information on how you may potentially help us in terms of, making this the place that you want to come into on Sunday, somehow making it a lot more appealing than your pajamas. So I think I do believe that was about it from the board. So there will be an announcement in an upcoming Sunday as to our next board meeting time. Thank you.
On that, I kind of like to suggest a flannel friendly, Sunday for, so you can bring those PJs as well.
PJ Sunday. Why
Yeah, yeah. Sharing together some of our personal and significant joys and concerns brings us closer as a faith community. We invite you to share the milestones that are deeply felt as part of your personal life, along with expressions of gratitude or acknowledgement. But please be mindful and considerate of all who come to worship with us this morning. This is a time of community building. The collective flames of these candles embody all the joys and sorrows which may have gone unspoken today, but are also deeply felt in this community. The first reading is an excerpt from Why the Right to Abortion Matters for Every Person by Sophia Bush. And I looked it up. She's an actress, I was like, what were W's daughters' names? Anyways, well. The emotions I feel, rage, fear, pain, frustration, sadness, empathy, are all consuming as I, along with millions of you, grapple with the enormity of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which for the last 50 years has protected our fundamental right to abortion care and to self-determination. It's infuriating to watch lawmakers tune out the cries of medical professionals and to see people treated and see women treated in the halls of a government which purports to be founded upon liberty and justice for all, as less than, as though their needs and their lives don't matter. And it is deeply painful to see people consigned, legislated to suffering. Our right to reproductive choice is fundamental to our democracy, so much so that one of the societal changes that signifies a backsliding democracy, one of the surefire things that happens anywhere when equality is chipped away, is a rollback of the rights of women, and particularly those relating to bodily autonomy. Without reproductive choice, we have no autonomy. Let us enter a place of peace and serenity, where you are one with your spiritual being. Be at peace within your space, where the absence of all that is temporal is its most cherished gift. Let us enter the stillness. May we find the compassion and empathy we need to strengthen relationships. May we find ways to love each other well. May we not judge or condemn, but rather build a beloved community. The second reading is an excerpt from The Truth About Christianity and Abortion by Christina Forrester. It simply cannot be argued that abortion did not exist in biblical times or during the time of Augustine and every other century until the 19th. The only thing that did begin to change was a liberation for women due to progress and a change in cultural and social values in the late 1800s, and a political tool with increased use of propaganda tools that took over thousands of churches in the 1980s. I believe the evidence suggests that political forces and resistance to change, the increasingly strong suffrage movement, and later women's rights movements that are truly behind the shift in views on abortion and women's health. And the topic has become an intersection for conservative politicians to reach voters. Please stand if you are able and sing "Wake Now My Senses," number 298.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
Thank you. Today's sermon is titled "Passionately Pro-Choice," to be delivered by Susan Landau. Susan began her career as a banker, following in her father's footsteps, and remained in banking for many years. She then tried a stint at the Shasta County Jail as a law enforcement clerk. From there, she became involved in the women's rights movement and worked in women's productive healthcare for 25 years in both California and Washington states. Up until recently, Susan was a member of the UUCC, having moved to Cambria in 2012. Last October, she moved to Port Townsend, Washington, in order to be closer to 3 of her grandchildren. Susan.
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute myself. So good morning. Oh man, I miss you all this morning. I was supposed to be there, but unfortunately had to postpone this trip, but I will be coming back just to visit. Some of you may remember that I previously delivered a sermon here in honor of the 43rd anniversary of the passing of Roe v. Wade. That was January 2016, just 6 years ago. At that time, I cautioned about how the right to privacy and abortion was being chipped away on our country, as it has been since the passage of Roe v. Wade. When I offered to do this sermon, I thought I could just resurrect that old sermon. But Friday, June 24th of this year changed everything. Life as we had come to know it in a free country changed when the US Supreme Court essentially ruled that women are now second-class citizens without the right to privacy, self-determination, bodily autonomy, and safe medical procedures. They killed Roe v. Wade with the stroke of a pen and took this country back 50 years in an instant. The fact is that prior to this recent decision, abortion was illegal in our country for a block of time lasting about 75 years. Prior to that, abortions occurred regularly and without national debate. They were part of women's lives. Abortion and contraceptives were legal before the Civil War. Reproductive health care was provided by female midwives made up of about 50% Black women, with the remainder split between Indigenous women and white women. Medicine as a profession was taking root in Europe and then spread to the US. Women were systematically and deliberately being excluded from universities and from providing health care. The medical profession became actively engaged in the elimination of female healers, which was mostly done by discrediting women and their knowledge. A part of this discrediting was comprised of racist and misogynistic smears designed for political persuasion so as to achieve legal reform. Black midwives were described as unhygienic, barbaric, ineffective, non-scientific, and unprofessional. At the root of these stereotypes were explicit efforts to destroy midwifery and promote white supremacy. Dr. Joseph DeLee, who was a preeminent 20th century obstetrician and a fervent opponent to midwifery, stated in a much quoted 1915 speech entitled Progress Toward Ideal Obstetrics, in which he said, quote, "The midwife is a relic of barbarism. In civilized countries, the midwife is wrong, has always been wrong. The midwife has been a drag on progress of the science and the art of obstetrics. Her existence stunts the one and degrades the other. For many centuries, she perverted obstetrics from obtaining any standing at all among the science of medicine. And even after midwifery was practiced by some of the most brilliant men in the profession, such practice was held opprobrious and degraded," end quote. Gynecologists explicitly revealed their motivations in undermining midwifery. They desired the financial gains, recognition, and a monopoly on healthcare. As Dr. DeLee wrote in a 1916 article published in the American Journal of Obstetrics and Disease of Women and Children, quote, "There is high art in obstetrics, and that it must pay as well as for surgery. I will not admit that this is a sordid impulse. It is only common justice to labor, self-sacrifice, and skill," end quote. They believed that men should be paid, but not women, and particularly not Black women. Abortion and reproductive care was part of midwifery practice. As an effort to discredit midwives, the practice of abortion was demonized as an abomination. I'd like to read a brief history of abortion from Our Bodies, Ourselves, a classic resource book that women of all ages still turn to for information about every aspect of their well-being. Over several centuries and in different cultures, there's a rich history of women helping each other to abort. Until the late 1800s, women healers in Western Europe and the US provided abortions and trained other women to do so without legal prohibitions. The state did not prohibit abortion until the 19th century, nor did the church lead in this new repression. In 1803, Britain first passed anti-abortion laws, which then became stricter throughout the century. The US followed as individual states began to outlaw abortion. By 1880, most abortions were illegal in the US, except those necessary to save the life of the woman, something that we don't have now. But the tradition of women's rights to early abortion was rooted in the US society by then. Abortionists continued to practice openly and with public support, and juries refused to convict them. Abortion became a crime and a sin for several reasons. A trend of humanitarian reform in the mid-19th century broadened liberal support for criminalization because at the time abortion was a dangerous procedure done with crude methods, few antiseptics, and high mortality rates. But this alone cannot explain the attack on abortion. For instance, other risky surgical techniques were considered necessary for people's health and welfare and were not prohibited. Protecting women from the dangers of abortion was actually meant to control them and restrict them to their traditional childbearing role. Anti-abortion legislation was part of an anti-feminist backlash to the growing movements for suffrage, voluntary motherhood, and other women's rights in the 19th century. At the same time, male doctors were tightening their control over the medical profession. Doctors considered midwives who attended births and performed abortions as part of their regular practice a threat to their own economic and social power. The medical establishment actively took up the anti-abortion cause in the second half of the 19th century as part of its effort to eliminate midwives. Finally, with the declining birth rate among whites in the late 1800s, the US government and the eugenics movement warned against the dangers of race suicide and urged white, native-born women to reproduce. Budding industrial capitalism relied on women to be unpaid household workers, low-paid menial workers, reproducers, and socializers of the next generation of workers. Without legal abortion, women found it more difficult to resist the limitations of these roles. I wanted to provide this background because the concept and the foundation of the anti-abortion movement is something that, as a young 34-year-old, I had never considered or even thought about. It is my guess that most people are unaware that the anti-abortion movement is rooted in white supremacy, the control of women, and the advancement of back then, a male-dominated medical profession. I was hired to manage the Feminist Women's Health Center in Redding, California in 1985. I arrived with a background in banking, 1 year as a law enforcement clerk at the Shasta County Jail, and my political innocence completely intact. I was able to convince the administrators that I could apply my background in management and my natural ability to write to any environment, including medicine and abortion. After I jumped up on my soapbox and told them how much I believed in a woman's right to choose, they decided to take a chance and hire me. At that time in my life, I was completely and deliberately non-political and incredibly naive about what was taking place in the political world, and in particular, the abortion world. I knew that I would be dealing with picketers and anti-choice people, but I honestly believed that they only needed to be educated in order to understand the significance and importance for women of keeping abortion safe and legal. Please remember, this was 1985. As a result of my belief, one of the first things I did was to call a press conference at the clinic. I had written a heartfelt and passionate letter to the protesters, explaining to them the emotional and detrimental effect their presence and actions of name-calling and yelling epithets had on the women who were coming into the clinic seeking services. They would yell at the women, sometimes with bullhorns, to shame them, belittle them, and humiliate them, believing that as they did so, the women would not come in. It was verbal abuse and bullying at its finest. In my innocence and being new to the abortion rights movement, I thought that the picketers just didn't understand the necessary and cruel burden their actions were inflicting on women. I thought that if only they knew the hurt and emotional damage they were creating in an already difficult time for these women, that they would have their aha moment and stop doing what they were doing. I believed that they would suddenly have compassion for the women coming into the clinic, and that they would want to support rather than judge, belittle, humiliate, and shame them. So we held a press conference. My first. Copies of the letter I had written were handed to each picketer who was there that day while the press took pictures. Local TV stations and local newspapers interviewed me. With nothing but a strong belief and a well-written, heartfelt letter, I innocently and unknowingly catapulted myself into the middle of the abortion battle in Redding, California. I became the face of abortion. The verbal retaliation I received from the antis was such a shock to me. It didn't take me long to begin to understand that the anti-choice people outside of the clinic didn't notice that there was a woman in this picture. They only saw the potential for a baby and a way to keep women in their place. They did not give credit to any woman for having any intelligence. They had no compassion for the woman's situation at all. Not for her inability to care for a child, for her autonomy and ability to know what was the right decision for her own life in her own situation. There was a strong element of judgment and punishment, not to mention cruelty. If you become pregnant and you are not married, then you need to be punished for having had sex by being forced into motherhood. If you become pregnant and are married, then you must have a child regardless of the circumstances to your marriage and family. It was and still is all very black and white. The women and their situations were completely insignificant and non-existent. The women were just incubators with no inherent rights, no voice, and certainly no ability to know what was best for them. For myself, I learned quickly that it was not mine to decide if a woman's reason was good enough. Her reasons are her reasons and none of my business. Again, not mine to judge. If you think it all the way through, I realized, did I want to be the one to stand in the doorway of the clinic and decide for each woman who was coming in whether or not her reason was valid? Was I willing to refuse services based on my personal opinion or beliefs and sentence that woman to go home and have a child she was unable to care for, did not want, or would she possibly go home and attempt to perform her own abortion, risking her life? I learned to trust women completely, to provide them with neutral information and step out of the way as they made their own decisions. Women know what is best in their own situation, period. It took me a while longer to realize that the great majority of picketers were men. There were surprisingly few women. I came to realize that these were men, and I figured this out based on their actions. These were men who were threatened by a woman having power to control her own life. If these men could not control women and force them to be dependent on them, they felt endangered. Again, this was 1985. They feared feminists and accused us of hating men, of being witches, and of being lesbians, as if that were somehow evil. But the knowing and understanding I took away from this was, if a woman can control her own reproduction, she has the freedom to control her own life. It's not about babies. It never was. A fetus is not a baby. It's about the woman. It's about women's lives and women's rights. For many, many years, I witnessed and experienced what women go through when they find themselves carrying an unwanted pregnancy. Perhaps it's financial. Perhaps she's 14 years old and molested by a family member. Maybe she's in an abusive relationship. Perhaps she already has 4 children and no partner. And perhaps she's 56 years old. There are a multitude of reasons, more than you can imagine, as unique as each woman, for which women decide to choose abortion. I wish now I had kept a journal and written a book. For some women, abortion is a clear decision, and they have absolutely no doubt about which course to take. For the majority of women, there's a process. She doubts herself. She beats up on herself. She's angry and judges herself for being so stupid. Perhaps she has already had an abortion and somehow having another one makes her a worse person. Am I careless? Is this God's will? Perhaps she considers herself pro-life and may even pick it outside of a clinic. Now here she is seriously considering doing what she has always claimed was murder. And yes, those women I just described do have abortions. Then strangely enough, they show up on the picket line again the following week. They are able to rationalize their own circumstances are somehow different, that they will be forgiven, but they continue to judge all of the other women who come to have abortions. Most women dig deeply into themselves when they are contemplating abortion. It's a process, a decision that is never entered into lightly. It is not about whether or not her prom dress will fit in 3 weeks. It is not a cavalier decision. It is a time of soul searching about each woman's personal belief system, her faith or spirituality, her life situation, her support network, her options, her family, her life. And when women make appointments and would come into the clinic, the majority of women had already made their decision, including who they needed to involve in making that decision. They were not looking for anyone inside or outside of the clinic to give them advice or tell them what they needed to do. As a feminist clinic, we never asked women to justify their decision to us. We would ask if she was firm in her decision, and we verified that she was not being coerced. We provided neutral, factual information about the procedure, and we supported each and every woman's ability to make her own decision, whatever that decision was. And we helped her get whatever she needed based on her decision, whether that was adoption referrals and information, prenatal care referrals, or abortion services. We believed in and trusted women to know what they needed in their own personal circumstances and situation. Women know, they absolutely do know. Roe v. Wade became the law of the land on January 22nd, 1973, protecting a woman's right to choose, and at long last granting bodily autonomy for more than half of the US population. Abortion was safe and legal in this country for 49 years, 5 months, and 2 days. Almost immediately, that right was under attack. On June 24th of this year, almost 50 years of chipping away at it, the Supreme Court completely overturned Roe v. Wade. When I heard the news, I was all at once overcome with despair and outrage. Even with the leaked decision and knowing it was coming, I was horrified when it actually happened. In my head, I was screaming. I was physically ill. I sat here and I wept and I raged. I thought of the battle I had dedicated my life to for 25 years. I thought of my daughters, of my granddaughters, and the assault on reproductive freedom. I thought of all the women who had passed through the doors of clinics seeking and receiving safe, legal medical services. And I experienced deep dread for the future of all childbearing people in this country. For me, this all comes back to the right for women to control their own destiny. When a woman cannot manage her own fertility, she is prohibited from managing her own life. For women, any plans, dreams, and aspirations, responsibilities, or commitment, no matter how important, carry a big contingency clause built in that says, of course, until or unless I get pregnant, in which case all bets are off. Think of any professional woman you know. She wouldn't be in that role if she hadn't been able to time and control her childbearing. Sometimes birth control works, sometimes it doesn't. Think of any girl you know who imagines becoming a professional woman. She won't get there unless she has an effective, reliable means to manage her fertility. This is about respecting and recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Our first UU principle. It is about our second principle, justice, equality, and compassion in human relations. I believe there is a piece of this in each of our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles. So what has the UU done? In 1963, prior to Roe v. Wade, the UUA passed a general resolution to support the reform of abortion statutes. In 1975, the UUA passed a general resolution supporting the right to abortion. The General Resolution 1987 reaffirmed its historic position, supporting the right to choose contraception and abortion as legitimate aspects of the right of privacy. And in 1993, there was yet another general resolution passed in support of reproductive freedom. In the 2015 Statement of Conscience, the UUA has expanded the phrase reproductive rights to reproductive justice, and it now includes 4 principles. On June 24th, 2022, the UUA president, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, issued a statement reaffirming the UUA's position on abortion. She concluded by saying, quote, "Our faith calls us to advocate on behalf of all of those who need ready access to safe, legal abortion care wherever and whenever they need it. We will not rest until that reality is true across the country. I urge lawmakers elected by officials and leaders in public life across this country to take action for gender and healthcare equity for all," end quote. In the end, I find myself actually encouraged because with this attempt to destroy reproductive freedom and the rights of women and people all over this country are speaking out, and they are speaking out loudly. Doctors are publicly reporting travesties that this ruling has caused, how women are suffering and having to travel across state lines while their lives are at risk, while they're in the process of miscarrying. I watch as we are coming together to say, no, we will not go back. Things are changing day by day since this ruling, and every day I hear of the pushback. This is not the fight that it was back in the day when it was still an uphill battle, making and keeping abortion rights legal. This is the fight to keep freedom that women have enjoyed for the last almost 50 years to control their own lives. I can only feel optimistic about where we are heading because we have the momentum and determination behind us. In the words of Margaret Sanger, no woman can call herself free who does not control her own body. No woman can call herself free until she can choose consciously whether or not she will be a mother. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. The morning's offering will now be given and received. Please remember that we are a self-sustaining congregation and provide financial resources for our many ministries from ourselves. We recognize the spiritual value of generosity and invite you to participate. If you are viewing this service remotely, please use one of the methods shown on the screen. Thank you. That was uplifting. Thank you for all the gifts given and received for the work of this community. Let us now sing the doxology. When are we singing? When all people on earth, what? You guys sing this. That's what I thought. Okay.
We sing it.
Oh, we all. Let us.
When all the peoples on this earth know deep inside their precious worth, when every single soul is free, we'll learn the name humanity.
Please stand if you are able and sing the closing hymn, We Gather Together, number 349.
We gather together in joyful thanksgiving, acclaiming creation whose bounty we share. Both sorrow and gladness we find now in our living. We sing a hymn of praise to the life that we bear. We gather together to join in the journey, confirming, committing our passage to be a true affirmation in joy and tribulation, when bound to human care, to know that we are free.
Let us now recite the Let us now recite the valediction. It is our work, shared with each other in covenant, that creates and sustains this beloved community. We extinguish this chalice as the light of this faith lives on in us, together in our hearts, minds, bodies, and spirits. Please extinguish your chalice at home now. After the benediction, we encourage you to stay for questions and comments. Diane or I will call on you when you raise your hand. Susan?
As we walk life's journey together, may we learn reverence and respect without judgment for each person's unique situation. May we learn to support and trust each other in our life choices in a loving and peaceful way, regardless of our gender, our religion, or our politics. May we learn truly to live in love.
Any comments?
Thank you, Susan. It was awesome.
You're welcome, Treva.
So I had a comment. I looked up the statistics yesterday because I always hear, 1 in 4 women has an abortion in her, by age 45, and it's true. It's actually 23.7%. But there's this definite stigma that we have that silences women to talk about it. If they're pregnant, they're considered, it's just ridiculous, I think. But that's the way it is.
Hank has his hand up. Hank, would you unmute, please?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Susan, a special thanks. I had no idea you were on what I call the front lines there. And that is an incredible commitment at a young age to be confronted with everything you were confronted with and to do what you did. So forever thanks and appreciation and whatever I could say. That was very disturbing, very touching, but thank you so much. And I have one last disturbing comment when I hear these things. And then I recently, having been a Catholic for a good part of my life, I have this very disturbing view, and I see it coming to light in one of the Supreme Court justices recently, Alito, I think, who made a comment yesterday or the day before, making fun of the Europeans' comments on the decision that he made. Was a key player in. And I've got this perverse view that the Catholic Church, if you go back into their history, was about using women to breed more members. And that's the way I feel about it deeply. And when I go back to them chopping off the toes of Indians to get them to submit to their religious views and to get their, so they couldn't keep their children away from them and trying to, brainwash their children. I mean, I really have a perverse view, but in this area, I think it's the sickest and it's coming out to the forefront again. It's very disturbing to me. And thank you, Susan, for all you've given to the cause. And that's incredible. Thank you.
Thank you, Hank.
I have to tell you that at 34, 35, 36, when I finally figured out that it wasn't about the babies, that was a total distraction, and it was really about controlling women, that was a pretty radical thing to say out loud. And I didn't say it a lot, but I knew, and I know that it was completely true. It's about controlling women's lives to keep them from reaching their true potential. And it's awful. So thank you for recognizing that. Yeah, I did my 25 years of service, and I thought, oh, good, that's all done. It's all it's all taken care of. Wrong.
Wow.
All right, Robert, you have your hand up. Would you please unmute?
Susan, I would just like to add my voice to the thanks for you putting the whole issue into context and your brave work and sharing that with us. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Robert.
Anita, would you please unmute?
Thank you, Susan. That
Hi.
was touching. And I wanted to tell you, you look very beautiful, even go through a hardship. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Okay.
I think Dolores wants to say something.
No, come on.
No, say from there.
So Susan, I just want to know, what is it we should be doing?
Oh, contacting your legislators, standing out on street corners. I have found if you Google, there's several articles on, 10 things you can do, 5 things you can do. And I think that, it's different this time. I think that people aren't going to let this go. I saw something just today on Facebook this morning of a picture of, I don't know the actress's name, but the one who was in A Handmaid's Tale. A picture of her, and it said, "Stay angry, November is coming." And I'm really, really hoping that this, doesn't disappear along with the war in Ukraine and, all the things that have all the headlines. I really hope that people remain really active about this and figure out how to get this overturned and make this the law of the land, because it's unconscionable when I hear about, like the 10, I'm sure everybody's heard about the 10-year-old girl. And there was I heard just the other day about a woman who was having an ectopic pregnancy, which is fatal. And, there is no viable pregnancy there. And she had to travel across state lines to get an abortion while her life is in danger. That's insane. It's totally insane. And it's not okay, ever.
We have one more hand, and that's Jeff.
Number one, want to say thank you. Oh my God, that was so cool. It was amazing. And wow. And I miss you a lot. So shoot, awesome. Definitely, obviously with you. I also really appreciated the whoop from Dolores in the middle of your speech. So I think you were affirming some of her the gender and all that. So I thought that was really cool. So right on, Dolores. Anyway, but just I guess I can say I'm very proud to be in such company. So thank you all. I mean, you and the congregation as well. And yeah, I think you're right. This is not something that will go away. They literally have us by the gonads, and we're going to make some noise. So this will get corrected eventually. It has been brought light to it. I think this time around, hopefully we'll make it permanent. So that I think is an important thing. And also, I just wanted to congratulate you for being, unbeknownst to yourself, and maybe because of the fact that it was unbeknownst to yourself, part of this fight. That meant a lot to me, that I'm sure it was much more important to you. Obviously I'm a guy, I'm somewhat removed, and embarrassedly so. But at the same time, I also want to point out that it is a human right. It's not just women's rights, it's all of us. If men who think that they're not part of this are completely oblivious and ridiculously so. And the thing that I hate about the chauvinist society that still exists hugely and has been reintroducing itself is an embarrassment to the rest of us men who actually don't believe in any of that. So I just wanted to say, for those of us who don't feel that way, we don't feel that way. And we're very upset, all of us. And I think we're in the majority, so that's a good thing. It's just that these people who are, like the ones that were outside your clinic, shout awfully loud. Bullies usually do.
Yeah.
So for those of us who are the meek who will inherit the earth, we're getting our turn. It's coming next, and we'll have the final say, I'm pretty sure, on that one. So keep up the good fight, and I love you. I miss you a lot. So thank you very much for all of it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Nancy.
Bye.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Mary
Thank you,
Jane.
Susan.
Randy.
Sneaking in and say bye. Bye.
Bye, Mary. Bye, everybody.